Hi, everyone.
Hey, Jackie.
How you doing, Wes?
I'm doing just fine. Yeah.
Your church is sure coming along. Looks like it's almost ready.
Yeah. We're getting close. Occupancy hopefully by the beginning of June.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. It's been a journey to say the least. It's all good.
Are you going to? Are there going to be opportunities to use that space for, like it used to get used for scouts sometimes and for cadets and stuff? Is that going to continue?
Yeah, we're just working through the policy implications of that again.
Okay.
It's particularly since the big box area is available for other stuff now. Certainly want to do that more and more. We want it to be a community gathering place for sure.
Natalie, yes, you are hearing a whirling noise, and outside of my room, people are using leaf blowers to clean, like literally clean the sidewalk outside my room. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
That's funny. Well, so I'm glad it's not my imagination.
It's like, you guys have 10 minutes. So I will mute myself for sure when I'm not talking. I'll try and if it becomes too much, I'll hand the chair over to Ray. It is Ray, right, Wes? You're not the vice chair.
Yeah, no, Ray, yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's great.
Hi, gang.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, Ray. Just so you know, I've got leaf blowers outside of my room, so the timing was kind of bad, but you're not hearing anything untoward, just people working. Okay, it's 1:30, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Attendance at the head of the meeting is 100%, including Councillor Mackay, Councillor Jolly, and I'm not sure about Councillor Hughes. I don't see her.
I'm here.
Are you?
I'm there.
You're not in my screen, so I should have looked at participants. Okay, good to see you. Calling the meeting to order, adoption of the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda that anyone would like to move? If not, can I have a mover, please? So moved by Wes Broadhead, the adoption of the agenda. All those in favor? That is carried. Approval of the minutes. Are there any errors or omissions that anyone would like to identify? Seeing none. Ray, would you like to move the minutes?
Minutes.
So moved by Ray Watkins. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving along to the advisory committee business, 6.1 North South Bus Route. It was great seeing the Youth Advisory Committee and Seniors Advisory Committee this morning at the CLSC meeting, but they're not here to speak to this. So Councillor Watkins, you may want to chime in on their behalf as we talk about this motion. But I guess the question I have presented by Will, have you got a presentation for us? Or who is presenting?
Jackie, just
Sorry, go
put a
ahead.
message in the chat that Kyle Ferguson is here from the youth committee.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I had had a message from Cheryl saying that nobody was going to be here, so I'm glad, Kyle, that you're here. That's terrific. Did you want to speak to this, Kyle, ahead of council, or are you here just to listen in?
I just had a quick point that I was asked to present on behalf of the youth council.
Okay, well, I'm going to just say you go ahead then, Kyle, and provide us with your points of view, and then we'll move into, I just want to be clear, Will, are you the one that's going to be providing a little presentation for us, or?
Yes, but it won't be a presentation so much as just a discussion, a presentation of words.
Okay, no problem at all. That's just fine and dandy. Okay, Kyle, you're on.
Okay, thank you. So right now, what I was given to me by our chair, Matt, who's taking the lead on this, that he said that the route that was proposed between our two committees was the Youth Advisory and Seniors Advisory would be one that runs from North St. Albert to Nocky. And apparently the only routes right now are indirect. So you'd have to go from Nocky to St. Albert Transit and then wait and catch the bus from St. Albert Transit north. And the proposed route would be something that runs directly from Nocky to North St. Albert. So it'd be running almost the same route as the 202 and the A14 combined, and provides more reliable coverage for expanding North Division while maintaining a link to St. Albert City Hall and its services, as well as the services located along St. Albert Trail, including the mall and other shopping centers. The route would also allow St. Albert seniors and students who may not have access to vehicles the ability to visit one another more easily, as well as more access to other businesses and facilities. So that's the long story short there.
Well done, Kyle. Thank you for that. That was nice and succinct. So I'm going to open it up right now for questions that any councillors may have of Kyle. I guess, Kyle, I would just ask the question, when you guys were having this discussion, were you able to identify how big a gap this is for our seniors and our youth? Like, or is it just that this would be an improvement to our transit system than what we already have?
Maybe if I can help Kyle out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ray.
See what happens. We had a joint meeting of the youth committee and the seniors committee. And it's very, very unfortunate that Matt can't be here. But once again, you know, Matt is a student and it is a university, I guess, exam times or whatever. And he's got so much school and so many other things. He just couldn't make it today. But he's really the person that needed to come here, talk about this, because he was very, very familiar with exactly where it was going to stop, with routes it replaced, distances and everything, right? So it's unfortunate that he could be here. But what it was that the seniors and the youth committee had a joint meeting and got together. And as a result of this joint meeting and during this joint meeting, came up with a proposed route. That's why I'm also a little disappointed that in the package, like they had a route proposed. So there's nothing in the package about a route. All there was we don't accept this. It's duplication of services. Yes, we know there's duplication of services and that you can get from North to South St. Albert by bus, but you're going like this in a million circles is what they're saying. And they want a route that goes more like this because it's going to be used more often by people. And so that's the difference. So without having the routes up that he's talking about, our proposed route in the package, I don't know how we can have a logical discussion about this as without the exception of just saying, well, no, it doesn't work. There's duplication of services. Yeah, we know that. So I guess the idea is this, we thought that this is a route that would be more used. Both the seniors and the youth committee agreed that this would be a route that would be more used. It'd be a more effective route. And they're not looking for all of a sudden you to say, okay, well, this is the route north-south, let's put it in place. What we may look for is some kind of a study on it, maybe some kind of an interim route for a period of 6 months that we could advertise and promote somehow and say, we have this new route and here's where it's going to stop at. And like I say, it was like Naki, St. Albert Center, the mall, kind of Walmart, Costco, kind of right up the trail, right? And that was the route. Like I said, it kind of does injustice that we don't have any kind of a report on it or background or just nothing that says it's duplication of services. So that's kind of my, the kind of a little bit more background on it. So, you know, it would be nice if we could maybe we should table this until we can have Matt come and talk about it, or we had some drawings or the route that we proposed, because I don't even see the route we proposed in the backgrounder.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Well, we have a couple of options here. I still have asked the question to Kyle, just in regards to obviously an improvement to our transit, and Ray's filled us in a little bit on that. But had you identified, or Matt has identified, actual gaps? Or yeah, if you could just speak to that.
Yeah, well, currently there's no route that goes directly from one transit center to, or one side of the city to the other. And like Councillor Watkins said, it's really hard to kind of get around the city on some of the transit routes. I know a lot of the transit is set up to feed commuter routes, because that is the large majority of transit users. But at the same time, not being able to go from one side of the city to the other, like if you get in on the bus and you get in at Naki and then you try to go to Deer Ridge, Oakwan, any of those more northern neighborhoods, it's another stop, get on, stop, get on. Or again, if you're trying to just go from Aikinsdale, that kind of a neighborhood, to go shopping north or anything like that, and actually use the transit for more than just getting into Edmonton, it makes it really hard. And this is a gap that was identified by seniors who primarily live in some of those older neighborhoods that are on the more south Edmonton side of the city, trying to get to the north. And also with the proposed recreation facility on the north side, having a transit route that takes you from one side to the other and over to new and expanding infrastructure would be a priority for both of our groups.
Okay, I appreciate that perspective. Any other questions for Kyle before we start to have a discussion and ask questions of administration, or hear from Will? I am not seeing anybody. So thanks, Kyle. And Will's gonna, I guess, kick us off with a discussion, hey?
Great. Thanks very much, Kyle. Maybe Kyle should hang around too, because there may be a further question of Kyle here later.
Yeah, good idea. And yeah, feel free to go whenever you're ready, Will.
Okay, thank you. In order to facilitate decent transfers between the commuters and the locals, it was our decision that it would be quite a convenience for the majority of transit users if all of the commuters traveled between Naki and St. Albert Center. So that way we could have all of the buses, or all of the routes north of the river. They could link up with the commuters for a one transfer journey into Edmonton or back from Edmonton. This is the majority of our ridership. So we've got all of our commuters at present that travel, if they're coming from Edmonton, let's refer to the coming from Edmonton direction. They currently travel from Naki all the way to St. Albert Center, all of the commuters, with the exception of Route 205. So that's an awful lot of capacity. And we felt that it was a different, when we looked at the route A14, and that is the route that runs from St. Albert Center all the way to the north around the Costco and back down again. The only deviation it makes is that it goes around the hospital. It goes on Belrose Drive and then Erin Ridge, and goes to so that we can stop at the hospital. Other than that, it is straight up and down between Costco and St. Albert Center. So we figured that if we've got all that capacity with the commuters traveling between St. Albert Center and Naki, as long as we made that transfer work between those commuters and the A14, we in essence have a one transfer system that does go from Naki to all the way to Costco. and serves the hospital, St. Albert Center, the commercial district along St. Albert Trail. And when we were putting our plan together, our entire plan, we knew we had to make some choices. And that was one that we thought we could make quite comfortably, because we could ensure that it was a good transfer point. And that way we would shorten the A14 so that it wouldn't have to go all the way to Naki, because we've got lots of capacity operating between the two at present. So that was one of the decisions that we made, is that we figured we didn't need another route running between Naki and St. Albert Trail. So we abridged the A14 at St. Albert Center. It's very workable in the scheduling. If we extended the A14 down to all the way down from Costco down to Naki, we would require the use of another bus. And that bus would have to operate throughout the operating period at a cost of roughly $450,000 extra. So we figured if we could make that transfer work, that we would be covering that north-south spine. Also too, is that in many cases, in the commuter, let's say coming from Edmonton, is interlined with the A14 at St. Albert Center. So one could literally travel in, stay on the bus, the same bus trip, all the way up to the hospital or to the commercial area around Costco. So we figured it was a good compromise to make. And that's why it was worked into the design that way. And especially late at night, in the evening hours, on Saturdays and on Sundays.
May have lost him.
You're muted.
I was muted, yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Ray. I was like, where'd he go?
Does that mean I'm supposed to stop?
No, you're not supposed to stop. You need to finish what you wanted to say before we open it up for questions. So carry on if you've got some more points.
So most of the off-peak period, there is an interline available that does serve that exact role to go up the spine of St. Albert and back down to Naki due to interlines.
Is that it?
With one transfer point, is that correct? You're saying?
At times there would be one transfer point at St. Albert Center. At other times, one could complete that. In the off-peak periods, one could complete that using one bus. So no transfer.
Okay, we have questions. So I'm going to go in order of hands, and I see Mayor Heron.
Okay, thank you. First of all, it's nice to see you back, Will. So I think you actually answered my question. So interlined means it's one of the intermunicipal or commuter buses, or maybe it's the 201 that gets to St. Albert Center, and then it actually turns into A14.
That's correct. I'm sorry if that's the transit term. It just comes off the tongue. Yes, it means
so off
one route
peak
turns into another route.
So off peak, you're really going from Naki to Costco straight, except for that one little jaunt around
the hospital. That's correct.
And I guess my other question was, I think you talked about making that transfer easier. So have you coordinated the schedule so that the 201 arrives around the same time as the A14 arrives, so that there's not a big long wait between the transfers?
That's exactly right. We know that that's a highly used transfer, so we want to make that one work.
Okay.
And it will.
So maybe it's a question for Kyle or Ray. Like Ray, you said they have to snake around the city, but there's no snaking around the city except for that one little jaunt around the hospital. It's a straight line. and one transfer. So now I'm confused about why that doesn't work.
Well, like I said, it really would help if we had a map,
Okay, Ken.
because I don't know the transit, and we're talking about it, and I would
Your
Ray,
mic is really-
Ray, you need to be maybe closer to your mic because you're muffling.
said it's really hard for me to comment on it because, like I said, this was put forward by the two committees. The exhibit from the committee isn't here that showed the route they wanted, nor do we have copies of any of the other routes up as visuals. So it's a little hard for me to say, okay, I see exactly what you're talking about. Brain will go, yeah, you can go down here and you can hop on here and you turn around here, and it's the only difference. Like I said, I'm struggling a bit, and the Kyle, and like I say, the fellows who was moving it and proposed the route is not here to talk about it. So, like, I mean, in the future, I would really like to have some visuals, especially when we're talking about a transit route. I know you know that, Will, but as a citizen, and I really don't ride a lot of transit, it's hard for me to just say, yeah, hop on here and curve around here and curve around there without seeing that. Like I said, there was no, I don't even have the visual from the committee that they proposed of their route in front of us here for us to discuss.
So
Struggling a bit here.
maybe a question for Will or Jay. I mean, I've got the maps of A14 and 21 right here. It's easy to find on the website. So I did. Did you see a proposed map from Matt? Okay, because if it's a straight line, I think the only difference would be that jaunt around the hospital. And maybe Kyle, did you see it? Can you help me see what's different?
Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that route.
Okay. I don't want to put either one of you on the spot, but it feels like we've got a straight line with one transfer. That's the way I'm seeing it, and I'm getting confused now. So I will cede the floor, Chair Hansen, and maybe you can go over to some of the other questions and might help me.
Thank you. So now I'm opening it up. Councillor Broadhead, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Oh, excellent. Go ahead.
Just a question in terms of the loads, using that 214. Can you give us some sort of order of magnitude about hours or passengers per hour on that one?
No, I can't provide those to you at this present time, although we are doing more counts on our local routes these days. I can certainly get you that, and at a
well, that'd be helpful then. Yeah.
But there's no question the A14, as the local routes go, the A14 that operates the straight line between St. Albert Center and the North Commercial District is our busiest route. Now, sometimes those numbers can be skewed by school children that get on the locals, but the A14 is a consistent, good, well-used local route.
Okay.
And we wanted to enhance, or we wanted to ensure that there was a relationship between the A14 and the commuters, and to create that spine route that goes from south to north.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I understand the compromises and the design sort of challenges of dealing with this. So, yeah, just we need to have some understanding of the order of magnitude. This is a $450,000 fix. Is, you know, that's not inconsequential. I mean, we can build a transit system that works for everybody if you spend enough money at it. Question is that you know, would this actually do it? So if the proposed route is direct from Naki to the north of St. Albert, just as sort of a spine run back and forth on half an hour schedule, is it half an hour to today, or is it hourly schedule?
Come September, it will be 20-minute frequency during the peaks and hourly in the off peaks.
And the connections are made?
The schedule is designed to ensure those connections.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Natalie, go ahead.
Thank you. Not so much a question, just a general comment. I'm kind of looking at this and thinking that council should really be making recommendations on the service level level, if you will, kind of at the policy level. When we start getting into detailed routes, I don't know that we can make really great decisions one route at a time. You know, I'm not, Wes might be able to, but I don't know that any of the rest of us kind of understand how kind of the route systems work. So I would just throw that out there, that I would rather see, you know, if we do want to make a change to our service levels for local routes, you know, like Council Broadhead said, we could throw, you know, $500,000, $1 million, however much at the problem to make it easier to navigate in St. Albert. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay or Councillor Hughes, do you have any comments?
No, I'm okay. I think that we should be taking this feedback, however, that regardless if this route gets changed or not, that the users are not completely satisfied with the service level they're receiving. And so whether transit wants to go back and reconsider, but obviously the people who are using it think that there could be improvements be made. So I think that regardless if we say we're going to do what they say, we should take that and recognize that they're still saying that something needs to be changed and that the commuting is not as efficient as it needs to be, basically.
Thanks for that. Councillor Mackay?
No, that was just exactly good comments by Councillor Hughes and Councillor Jolly. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Councillor Watkins. You're muted.
We are still in questions, right? Not debate.
We are still in questions, not debate.
Like, see what happens is I know that Will said, you know, you're looking for, you have a one transfer system that goes from north to south. And I think what somebody is asking for here and what we're asking for is a one route without a transfer system. And I think you said that happens some of the time, but not all of the time, that you can use the same bus. And you threw out a $450,000 number. And when you throw out a number like that, that gets people like concerned, because we know transit loses a bunch of money. So where did you get that number from, and what is that based on, $450,000? Because I'm not proposing buying a new bus or anything. I'm proposing, and I think what we're proposing is maybe a temporary route, or what do you call it? Just
a pilot.
Yeah, pilot program is what I'm looking for. Sorry, a pilot program of utilizing one bus in this time. And, you know, we talk a lot about commuters. I heard you mention commuters probably 15 times in your presentation. And as Councillor Hughes mentioned, there are other people besides commuters who use the bus system. And we're hearing from two groups here that they don't find it sufficient, and they're asking for maybe a route that would be more usable and could provide more local user ridership of the bus system. That's the whole goal of it, is to increase local user ridership at some point. So I'm just wondering where you come up with more specifically, where you come up with a $450,000 number from. Because when you throw out a number like that, I'm not proposing that we institute a full new bus route instantly and buy a bus. So I think that's the cost of buying a bus.
No, that's the cost of operating the bus for 1 year.
Right.
We would have the bus. That's assuming that we will have the bus to be able to deploy. That being said, it's based on adding a bus to the schedule, a single bus for operation, and it's based on the number of days, the number of hours each day, and it's multiplied by the cost per hour that transit requires to operate a bus.
So your $450,000 number was to run what? Full-time service, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year?
No, that approximately 250,000 of that would be just the operation during peak hours on weekdays. The remaining 200,000 would be the expense of operating it in the off-peak hours, midday and Saturday. So oh, sorry, go ahead.
The $450,000 is just operating costs. So you need a bus and $1,000 to operate it.
Correct. That's just operating dollars.
On a full-time schedule, peak and off hour.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
And Saturday.
Thank you.
Councillor Jolly, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just have a quick question for Wes. Can you remind me how often we do the transit user surveys? And can you comment on whether we adjust service based on that feedback?
Are you asking me or administration?
Sorry, the other Wes.
Oh, Will.
Sorry, Will. I'm sorry, Will.
No problem.
Wes, if you have an answer, by all means. I
Oh,
apologize.
We conduct those every 3 years. And
Thank you.
the glaring issues or repetitive issues, yes, we do take action to try to correct all of those while staying within our budgetary constraints. So it does allow us to identify repetitive issues, glaring issues, and we do strive to get those corrected, whether it's a scheduling, you know, we might not be able to correct the problem right away, you know, that day, but come the next September or come the next April, we certainly try to plug up any of those inconsistencies.
Thank you. And I apologize. You and Wes are stacked on top of each other. Thank you.
Councillor Watkins.
Yes, sorry, I just had one more question. And Will, maybe you could provide me with the ridership numbers now, like what we're currently under, local versus commuter, and pre-COVID local versus commuter.
Well, commuter ridership from its peak pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, we are now at about 25% of that remaining. So we've lost 75% of the ridership on the commuters.
So on the commuter,
the commuters have not lost that same amount because we transport a lot of school children. So the locals have still remained consistent.
So you're saying the commuter ridership is down 75% and the local ridership is not down?
No, it's not down nearly 75%, but it is relatively stable. I don't know the exact figure, but I believe that it's almost neutral to what it was before because schools are still in session.
Okay, and
we
sorry,
gained a lot of riders because of the free transportation for youth. We gained a lot of riders in that respect.
And the approximate numbers of right now of commuter and local is what? You know that number?
Of total per day?
No, right now. Is it? You said they're down 75%. So right now, are there 5,000 commuter and 20,000 local daily, or what is it? Roughly?
Well, in the pre-pandemic, we used to regularly or daily measure the ridership on the commuters. So I have better information on the commuters. Okay. But right now, we'd be looking at about 500 a day.
On commuter, and how many on local?
Well, on local, we're looking, I'm sorry, I don't have that number in front of me.
Is it twice as much or is it 10 times as much?
No, it would be relatively similar. It would be around the 500 range.
So our transit now is serving roughly 1,000 people a day. Is that what you're saying? The whole system-wide?
1,000 people a day is, yes, probably quite close.
Okay, and that's part of the reason, Kyle, why when I told the youth committee and the seniors committee, it's going to be hard to get another bus route or any kind of change to the bus system.
During the pandemic times, yes, I would strongly recommend that we don't.
And like I say, let's be clear here what they're asking for. They're not asking for anything but a consistent north-south route without a transfer. You get on one bus at Naki and you can get off that bus at the north end somewhere and hit the major hot points of St. Albert along the main route. That's what they're both asking for. And like I say, maybe it's, as Councillor Jolly said, maybe it's more appropriate in customer satisfaction surveys, But we make a lot of recommendations here as council to change service levels all the time about everything, all sorts of stuff, consistently, constantly. And this is given to us by two groups of individuals that we picked to give us advice on our community. And we asked them about transit, and this was their comments about transit.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Jolly, did you have your hand up again? No? Yeah, I guess my questions, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I guess I'll just tag on to a little bit of what Councillor Watkins and others were saying. Well, I agree with Councillor Hughes and Jolly that this is really coming to us as some dissatisfaction of not commuters, but of people who want to use the service locally. People who want to get from the south to the north and back again, get their shopping done without, going through other neighborhoods. And I guess maybe it would just, I don't know how many times it would stop. That would be up to transit. So I think if there's a takeaway from this, maybe we need to look at that, especially now that our new park and ride is open. And it's been recently open. So I'm going to guess there's going to be some opportunity to do a better review once it's been up and running for a little while, and maybe once we're out of the pandemic. But I think we ought to be responding to some dissatisfaction of our residents and of our advisory committees. That's my takeaway from today. But I also wanted to talk about the $450,000. So if you were to put a bus like this in place, I don't know, with limited hours, say you could go from Ainsdale to the north from 10 until 4, 5 days a week. I'm throwing that out because I don't know what you guys do in your offices, but what does that look like in terms of the cost?
If you operated it for only part of the day, let's say half the day, then that cost would be reduced by roughly 50%. Because that cost is based on the hours per day that a bus would operate. But the idea of getting from Ainsdale to the north is a difficulty in a sense, because would you want to operate from Grandin all the way to the north, and then from, let's say, Ainsdale over to Northridge? Right. The difficulty is that you're looking at examples then of having a bus from every neighborhood to every neighborhood.
Yeah,
and
I understand.
We painstakingly looked at a lot of opportunities. When we were doing the restructure, we poured through every possibility we could to have long routes that went, let's say, from the Ainsdale area all the way to Northridge. But then when we examined it, we knew that we would have we'd be putting a lot of capacity where it isn't warranted. And we had to make a number of tough decisions in order to bring the cost down. But in some cases, if you travel in a certain direction at a certain time of day, you're for lack of a better way to put it, you're wasting a lot of capacity. You're wasting transit operating resources.
I guess where I'm coming from,
all of that when we design.
I understand that, and I understand that. I'm sure that you looked at every single angle. I guess putting myself in the shoes of a senior that needs to get to the north end with a shopping bag and needs to get home again, and it's cold outside, and maybe a transfer is difficult or whatever. So that's one situation that I'm looking at. And the other situation I'm looking at is somebody like Matt, or a student who is is basically on a time crunch, and we're asking them to use transit to get themselves to university. But it's not proving to be that easy. So at the end of the day, they might opt not to use it. And then, then we come full circle around the cost of transit and how much do we offer. So I understand it's complex, but I think if these two advisory groups came up with this proposed route, there must be some issues, real issues that are happening to different individuals. And I would be asking, I guess, I don't know if this is going to pass or not today, or whether we're not going to deal with it today, it's going to come back or whatever, but that the takeaway is that maybe we need to do another review now that the park and ride is opened around some of those routes. Councillor Watkins.
Maybe I could ask Will a question and ask, maybe you could tell me how to do this, answer this question in a different way. Okay, it seems that the youth and the seniors are both saying they feel that there's a lack for a non-transferable. You don't have to get off a bus. You can get on the same bus to go from north to south and hit the Naki and end up at Costco somewhere and hit the St. Albert Center, City Hall, library, like the major facilities from one end to the other. So they're saying that's a need. You're saying, what I hear you saying is that, yeah, we have that need met 100% of the time by getting a transfer, off peak hours by a bus that you can stay on the same bus and go there. And I don't know if it's all the same places that they want to hit. I don't know exactly if it is or not, because we don't have either map up. We don't have their map up in front of us with the stops. But maybe the question is, how do we address their concerns then? Like, so I'm not really saying that this committee should pass and say, let's make a bus route instantly and institute it. But what I am asking is that we as council find a way to meet the concerns of the residents who are users and aren't commuters, to make the bus system more efficient for their use. So maybe I ask you how we do that, and then I'll amend the motion, because I don't think the motion needs to be the establishment of a bus route. And I agree, we're not here. It's not our job to establish bus routes, nor are we experts on it. But how do I meet the need of what they want, which is consistent north-south connection? And maybe it's just, you have to add in a few more spots and you have to do it more consistently without the transfer. And maybe we're 60% of the way there. So
and just before you answer, Will, Kyle just wanted to make a point on some of this, so I'm certainly going to let him do that. Go ahead, Kyle.
He has his hand up. He knows.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I understand with transit, it can't be designed to serve every person individually, because then you would have bus routes going every which way, and it's not feasible to go, like you said, from Grandin North, Aikinsdale North, and such like that. I think the problem was more identified that even if a route does exist that allows you to go from north to south and vice versa, that it might not be as easily recognizable as that, because somebody might look at the commuter routes and go, okay, I can go from St. Albert Center north, but I don't know how to get from the south to north. And while there clearly does, a route clearly does exist, like you said, with the off hours, you can take the 202, or you can take one of the commuter routes from Naki to St. Albert Center, then it might be more of an issue of communication of that route, or of identification of that route to the people that are kind of looking for it. Because if I went back to the youth council and said, hey, there is a route that goes this exact route, it's exactly what you want, they'd be happy with that. But I think because it was brought to our attention from both the seniors and the youth, while it might exist, it's not an easily identified route, and it's not something that people know is there or is present. So I could bring it back to them and say that, or it might be worth saying in like a transit update in like one of the city spotlight things or something, hey, if you're trying to get from north to south, this is how you can do it. Because while I can use Google Maps and go, I want to go from here to here, and it tells me get on this bus at this time and do this, some seniors might not have that ability, or some youth who aren't familiar with certain functions might not have that ability. So I completely agree with you that there is a route that is present. And while it might not be perfect for everybody, transit can't be that, but I think it might be more of an issue of communication about the routes and the availability of where you can go and when. Thanks.
Thanks, Kyle. Take it away, Will.
Perhaps there are opportunities. We are at a point now where we're debating whether to put out our printed ride guides for this coming September. Now we'll probably print a few because we don't want to completely go without, but that information, we go to great lengths to make sure that our website has all that information in it. Trip finding, schedules, maps, special bulletins or announcements. We could make sure that an explanation for how to get from Naki all the way to the Costco area is a part of that. If we haven't already, I don't think it's prominent, but we could make it more prominent, those kinds of explanations. We could certainly look at information. We have lots of avenues for information, and we could certainly look at those opportunities and that would be a cost-effective way to address the issue.
Okay, thanks for that, Will. I've got Mayor Herron and Councillor Hughes, and then I guess I'd like to, hopefully our questions are going to be exhausted and we'll get something on the table to actually debate about. Mayor Herron.
I think Kyle just said it very well. I mean, the committees can absolutely bring their ideas to the appropriate place, and this is probably how it's done. But I think, honestly, if Kyle was to take this back and if we take it back to the senior and say, this is actually what is already offered. It's actually very similar to what you're asking for. And if we do what you're asking, it's going to cost $450,000. They'd be like, whoa, we're good. So I think this is a process, and people are absolutely throw ideas on the floor all the time, but there's consequences to those, and it's complicated, etc. So I appreciate Kyle's words that maybe it's a little about education, and that's why I've always really thought we need a ongoing transit advisory committee made up of transit users and non-transit users to kind of get a pulse on the ridership in St. Albert, and I still want that. But Will, just so you know, I'm on the website because, yeah, you can bring up the individual route maps, but when I bring up the whole map on our website right now, there is actually no dark. The 201 is supposed to be navy blue. It does not indicate going from the Naki all the way to St. Albert Exchange. So we need to update the website. It does if you click on the 201 specifically, but not on the big overall colored map, so you can plan it out.
Yeah, there's some difficult. We can certainly look at that.
Okay.
There are some difficulties with putting so many lines in the same corridor. Sometimes they look like one line. Sometimes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I get that. But if I was to actually pulled up this when I was reading my agenda package instead of the individual ones, I would have completely agreed with the seniors and the youth. I'm like, whoa, you can't get, but you. So that might, as an education and communication piece, needs to get fixed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Now we've got Councillor Hughes, Councillor Mackay, and Councillor Broadhead.
I have a dog about to vomit. This is just a wonderful afternoon. Totally as an aside. Anyway, what if this does not pass or whatever happens? Councillor Watkins and to Kyle and what I would love to have is, based on the new information that this has been brought forward in this committee, additional feedback from both committees to say, okay, well, this is what we have. So based on what we currently have, what is your additional feedback, right? Like, is it that it's not being well communicated, or how could we improve it? Or specifically, what else is missing, I guess, is what I would love to hear back from both, regardless, I guess, of what happens. That's what I'd like to have brought forward from the discussion so that we have a better understanding of, because I feel like in some ways you've brought forward the solution, but what we really need to do is really well define the problem and then see if there might be some other way to solve the problem, seeing as the current solution seems extremely expensive. right? So that's what I would love to hear back from is, based on what we know now today and based on what we have, that we get further clarification from both committees as to what else needs to be done. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, maybe Councillor Watkins will want to craft something different. I haven't even accepted a motion yet, so we're going to continue here. Councillor Mackay, Councillor Broadhead, and then Councillor Watkins.
I'll be really quick because the points have been already raised. I'm just curious. I was trying to look. We used to be able to get Next Bus app on our Spruce It Up, but now that's changed. Do we currently have a bus app available for the city of St. Albert? Sorry.
Yes, we do. It's the transit app.
Yeah.
And we're looking at another partner as well that we might be bringing on board in the near future. But the transit app is the one that we direct people to now, and it's regional. It's the one that's consistent with Edmonton and with Strathcona County, and we disbanded Next Bus service or Next Bus.
Yeah, no, I was aware that it was no longer operating, but I guess my question would be is if you were able to use that app to make that determination to go from Naki to North St. Albert, would it, without having to go on and plan your route and everything like has been suggested, could you use the app to actually get you from one destination to the other?
That's the idea of the app, and to tell you when the bus will arrive.
Yeah, so something out there is existing. It might be challenging for maybe somebody, seniors without the access to app or ability somewhere along that, or if somebody doesn't have a mobile device. But right now we currently have an app that will allow us to plan our routes.
And we have a route planner also on the website that is Google Transit based. So there are opportunities for that if you're comfortable using apps in that way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And matter of fact, I think, rather like your point about having to print out how many routes do you print out? What information do you print out? I guess you require some because that's the nature of the audiences and they have to be positioned somewhere. But I mean, I think even as we move into smart fares, we're moving more online. That creates some uncomfortable situations for some people. But as we move towards smart fare, we are moving away into more of a tech savvy world. So I think that there are some opportunities there too that shouldn't go unrecognized. So.
Well, we've seen the usage of ride guides drop dramatically in recent years since apps have come on stream. Also, too, the pandemic had a role in the decision regarding the ride guides because of hand contact and discarding ride guides on the bus. It just seemed unsanitary. So
yeah. No, good points. I mean, I'm really looking forward to whenever we can get smart fare up and running. I think that even eliminates another contact point. So,
thank you, Councillor Mackay. Over to Councillor Broadhead.
Well, I'd like to thank Kyle for bringing this conversation back to the actual point that we're talking about here. Honestly, go onto the website, bring up the stat trip planner, put in the time you're leaving Naki and where you want to go, and you'll see just how direct it is. I put in 1,500 hours. It tells me to get on the 203, get off at St. Albert Center, get on the 814, and it's about as straight as it can go. And so the route exists. So if you know what all you have to do is do a little bit of work to plan your trip out. And it's right there. So I don't know how much more direct you could get. Honestly, just go ahead and do it. Go onto the website, go on to St. Albert Transit, go on Stat Trip Planner, put in 1,500 at Naki, and then go to Costco in North St. Albert and see what comes up. And then you'll see the trip that's actually being asked for. And but to your point, Kyle, about advertising what and how you get there, that's a good point. So I think if we could follow through on that. I think that's a good idea.
Thanks, Councillor Bradhead. Just before I go to Councillor Watkins, I'm just wondering a question to Mr. Lafleur. If we don't do anything with this motion, it falls off the books, right? Or is it that we would need to move a motion that refers it back to the advisory committees would be a clearer motion?
Sorry, first of all, I don't think you really have the option of doing absolutely nothing. The bylaw that sets up the standing committee deals with this situation, excuse me, situation where a recommendation comes from standing committees, and it gives you some options. You can either, first of all, you have to pass it along to council, or alternatively refer it back to administration. You don't have the option of just letting it die right here. So that's the first thing to point out. Now, within those two alternatives, you have a number of different ways you could go. You could, for example, pass a motion to refer it back to administration with specific instructions of what you want admin to do and when you want to see it again. Or you could just say, let's go to council and we recommend that administration be instructed to come up with a plan to implement this route. Or you could go to council and say, we recommend that nothing be done. But that all is something that, there needs to be some kind of motion, because that's the way it's set up under the committee bylaws. I hope I'm being clear enough. I could read the exact section if you'd like. But
oh, no, thank you. I don't think that's necessary. I'm going to go to Councillor Watkins, who I think wants to refer this back to the committees, and then Mayor Herron, and then I think we should try and get something on the floor. Councillor Watkins.
I was going to say that we just refer back to committees to seek clarification to provide them the information to say, okay, here's the routes, here's how easy it is, here's the information that we were told, and then also, okay, what do you want to do now? Is there anything you need? Is there any clarification? Instead of just letting it drop off, and just bring it back to next committee of both and just ask them. And I would like to actually ask Kyle's direction on that, because besides me, he was the only one who was in on the meeting in the discussion when we talked about this route. So I think if we just sent it back, said, here's the information that we've been given, here's how easy it is, here's what you should do. They may say, oh, okay, that's great, everything's fine, no need to do anything else, and we come back. Or they may say, well, look, like we said, the whole point is one point of transfer. Is there any way we can get it without a point of transfer? Can we look at that? Can it stop at these places? Can it stop here? Maybe they have some input on that. Or like I say, it may end up in nothing and it comes back. But I think we owe it to these committees to kind of go back and listen to what they have to say, since they did bring it forward. Like I say, this wasn't my proposal. This was
okay. But you're the liaison to the group. So I know Councillor Hughes has put in, Cheryl has forwarded something that Councillor Hughes has written, that the Seniors Advisory Committee and Youth Advisory Committee provide further input regarding implementing North-South bus route in St. Albert. I know
Councillor Watkins.
Do you mind if Councillor Watkins moves that, just because he's a liaison?
He sent it in, I believe.
Oh, sorry. I thought it
Brains and ran with it.
Oh, okay. Maybe Cheryl meant to say Councillor Hanson, does this work for you? But she put Councillor Hughes. So Mayor Herron, and then I'm back to you, Councillor Watkins.
It works for me if that's a question. I always thought it too. I thought it was Councillor Hughes. I was wondering what was going on.
Okay. Mayor Herron?
There's two motions in our package. One was one the advisory committee had, and then the one was from administration. So I was going to propose that, but I don't have to, that I was going to move the second one, that we not proceed with implementing it. But then I was going to tack on that, that maybe Will or Jay, that Transit attend the next seniors and the next youth advisory committee and give the same report and presentation to them. But by moving the recommendation of administration, we're actually closing the loop on the whole thing. So it's up to you, Chair Hanson.
I think, I don't know that, I think letting them understand the, this information and getting a better understanding of the cost and everything, I think would be, because then once that's done, this probably won't come back for a $450,000 hit. But I think we need to direct our transit people to maybe go into those advisory committees and provide this explanation so that there is a better understanding, and then maybe do some, I don't know what's next, but back to you, Councillor Watkins, to make your motion, and then we're going to debate that.
I'll make the motion, Madam Chair, that the Seniors Advisory Committee and Youth Advisory Committee provide further input regarding implementing north-south bus route in St. Albert. And
I accept that. So any opening remarks?
I think all the comments have been made. I think we really owe it to, hang on, my one son just came and he's yelling. Q, I'm online. Can you please? Sorry about that. I think we owe it to these committees to go back to them and seek some more clarification. And like I said, and like I said, we didn't have their map here, and they had stops marked on there. I don't know if those concerns have been addressed. And I do think most likely when we go back and have a discussion, 99.9% of this is going to go away, and maybe there can be a very minor adjustment so that we can have a continuous St. Albert Trail, maybe even in off-peak hours or something also, right? So I just encourage you to let's just pass it back, send it back. Let's hear what they got to say, get some clarification, provide them with the new information about the costs. And I think we owe that to them. So those are my opening comments.
I appreciate that. Is there any more commentary or debate on this?
If I may, I'd be happy to visit with the group at any time. I've done it before. We've had those discussions, and their group, great group to meet with. I'd be happy to.
It would probably be, we have you at that meeting. When we have the meeting back, we'll send you an invite.
Yeah, now that I'm back. But
okay.
One other thing, if I may, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this before, that there may be some concern about some of the routings in the local network as it is, but it's also, we are operating currently on a modified schedule, which is a lower level of service that we would normally offer on a holiday or between Christmas and New Year's. So that might have added a little bit to the dissatisfaction that you may have heard, but we are slated to go back up to full service in September because the schools are targeting, the post-secondary schools, I mean, are targeting to return to in-person classes. So the September schedule will be quite a bit different than what you're seeing today too. I just wanted to add that one bit.
Thank you very much, Will. Any other councillors on debate? I'll just say that I think this has actually been great discussion. And because these are public meetings, we've probably done a little bit of education and awareness just by having this discussion for people who are interested to know about. So I'm glad it's going back to committee, and I'll certainly be supportive of this. So I'm calling the question, all those on the committee in favor? That is unanimous. Thanks so much, everybody, for your discussion, and Will, and your presentation. And we'll move on to the next item. Thanks, Kyle, for joining us and clarifying a few things from your committee's perspective. Councillor Watkins.
I was just saying thank you to Kyle and Will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, you may hear my dog behind me snoring because she's pretty loud. Flipping over on the agenda. Okay, on to 7.1. We are on to the implications of the provincial budget. And Diane, I understand, has a presentation. Hi, Diane.
Hi, good afternoon, Council. I'm just going to share a presentation with you here. Can everybody see that? Okay, perfect. Okay. So the tax and political structure in Canada requires partnership between federal, provincial, and local governments to provide needed and desired services for all Canadians. As all residents physically live and work in our cities, towns, villages, and rural areas, municipal governments are in a position of having to basically provide or at least support most of the services that are required. However, at the same time, as you know, we have limited ability to generate revenue outside of traditional property taxes. It's long been recognized that financial support from the province and the federal government is critical, most notably in the area of infrastructure management. Municipalities are responsible for over 60% of all public infrastructure. A large portion of our capital funding is accessed through provincial and federal programs. And the types of programs and the level of financial support varies from government to government and consistently leaves municipalities in a state of uncertainty. Given this symbiotic relationship between levels of government, it's understood that budget and program changes at these levels can have large impacts on our municipal environment. The most significant impact to St. Albert and all municipalities in the province was the government's decision to extend the MSI, or the Municipal Sustainability Initiative program, and delay implementation of the LGFF, which is the local government fiscal framework, until the 24-25 fiscal year. It's also important to note that while the government speaks of the LGFF program in their budget, the enabling legislation to create the program has not yet been proclaimed, which leaves us further vulnerable and leaving us having to continue to operate and plan in a state of uncertainty. More concerning than the extension of the MSI program were the significant changes from what they were talking about in last year's budget in terms of the amount of funding allocated under this program. So the province has front-ended a large portion of the funding in the 21-22 year in order to spur economic activity in response to COVID, and then has reduced allocations in the following 2 years. So when we look at it in an overall, on the overall 3-year average, we're basically expecting about a 25% reduction in capital funding from what we've historically had. This level of funding reduction, which is also anticipated to continue when the local government fiscal framework comes in, will have significant ramifications to our community in terms of our ability to properly maintain our existing infrastructure, as well as to grow our community. A couple of years ago, we did begin including a funding reduction in our longer term planning in anticipation of some of these provincial decisions. However, the funding cuts that were announced in this year's budget were deeper than we had planned for, and will have impacts on us in future years. So over the last 4 years, we've received an average of about 15.1 million in MSI funds. So as you can see, the government also did a heavy front ending of these funds in 2017, similar to what they've done as part of the 21 budget. Over the next 5 years, it's estimated that our provincial infrastructure funding will average only 11.1 million. So that's a $4 million annual reduction. There's also risk involved in the estimate that we have used. So in this sample, we've used 11 million as our estimate for the local government fiscal framework. And there is risk involved in that. The details of those programs haven't been finalized or communicated to the municipalities. So it's unclear if there's going to be any substantive changes to the formulas that are used to distribute that money to the municipalities. For purposes of our initial estimates, we've had to assume that the allocation formulas will remain relatively consistent with MSI. Also, the concept behind the LGFF program is that funding will be linked to provincial revenues. So it's been suggested that the prior 3-year average provincial revenue will be the baseline. And that would mean that the current budget for LGFF is based on an estimated provincial revenues from 21 to 23. If provincial revenues do not perform as currently budgeted, the base LGFF funding available for allocation could also be impacted. So, of course, as you know, capital investments for us are broken down into 2 categories. Our RMR, which relate to maintaining current service levels required by life cycle plans, or considered a replacement or rehab of existing infrastructure, facilities, and equipment. And then our growth capital plan are initiatives that are required to meet future demand relating to facilities, equipment, and technology for the development of cultivating and strengthening the community. The differentiation between these 2 types of capital programs is important, because the RMR portion of our capital plan is governed by the principle that the city is committed to the preservation of, and long-term viability of its current infrastructure, and it commits available capital dollars towards the repair, maintain, and replacement of existing assets prior to considering new capital growth projects. So to be considered financially sustainable, a municipality should be able to financially support its existing infrastructure through its own earned revenues. The need to rely on grants from other levels of government to maintain infrastructure creates risk to the organization. As grants continue the trend of being less stable and reliable, this risk grows. So currently our capital program is funded through three main sources: our pay-as-you-go component, which is part of the tax levy, contributions to our life cycle reserves, which is also part of the tax levy, and our provincial and federal grants. So currently the city relies heavily on grants to support its RMR requirements. There's currently a large delta between what we should be funding through the tax base and what we're actually contributing. With a municipal asset base valued at over 700 million, we would need to be contributing approximately $32 million a year to support those assets in the future. This delta also continues to grow each year as we continue to add assets, both built assets and assets that are contributed by developers, without a corresponding funding source to support their future needs for their maintenance and replacement. So our current annual tax supported contribution as part of the 21 budget is approximately 12 million. And so that's, again, compared to, as it sits today, our estimated 32 million of what we probably should be contributing. Previous analysis suggests that with the current shortfall and continued growth at historical rates, a 1.5% tax increase every year for over 20 years would be required to completely close this gap, where alternate revenue sources should be pursued to reduce this tax burden. Council made bold steps to start addressing this gap with a 3-year commitment to increasing the tax levy to further support life cycle reserve. A continued commitment will be required over a long period of time to properly address this issue. So with the philosophy of supporting RMR needs prior to growth, the current estimated reduction in provincial grant funding does not at this point negatively impact our RMR program. But what it does do is directly, dollar for dollar, impact the remaining funding that's available for growth projects. As we currently need to use a large portion of our grants to backfill the RMR funding shortfall, without continued increased contributions to our pay-as-you-go and life cycle reserves, further reductions in grant funding may start impacting our ability to carry out these critical projects. So just some other sort of tertiary impacts that kind of came out of the provincial budget. So education tax. So at this point for the 21-22 fiscal year, the government has frozen education taxes, which is certainly good news for our residents for this coming year. But they do have increases built into the next couple of years. This is important, of course, because the city is required to include this levy in the annual assessment and property tax notice. And while it's completely outside of the control of the city, it impacts the overall amounts that residents and businesses are required to pay. The second thing that's kind of come out, not necessarily through the budget, but sort of recently, is that there's planned changes to the disaster recovery program, and I know there's some of this is a little bit up in the air right now, but there's talk about making municipalities responsible for up to 10% of the costs related to a natural disaster. So, as you can imagine, a big fire like Fort McMurray, 10% of the costs of damaged infrastructure would be huge. So again, details on these changes are coming, and we'll be assessing and coming up with our options and recommendations around that at that time once we have more information. On the affordable housing front, while the province intends to implement the Affordable Housing Review Panel's recommendations to increase affordable housing supply, the provincial capital funding in this area is projected to decrease by 79% over 2 years. So AUMA has made the statement that they are expecting the not-for-profit and private sectors will be asked to take on a greater role in this area. The fourth one around Senate elections and referendums will be held with the municipal elections this fall. And the concern with this, the main concern among this one is that it will detract from local issues. But while limited details are available this time, there's $10 million been set aside in the budget through the ACP grant to support municipal initiatives relating to supporting this extra requirement. So that the hope is, if it's costing us some extra money to be able to include those referendum questions and those pieces, that there'll be some grant money to help offset that. Provincial public sector wage spending. So there's an intention to cut public sector wage spending by $800 million. Given that roughly 30% of St. Albert's employment base work within government, there could be tertiary impacts to the local economy. And the last one was just a small one I threw in there here because it's just another one of those things that sort of keeps getting pushed down by the province. But so this is basically for DNA analysis that the RCMP need to send in the course of their work. This has always been covered between the federal government and the province, and now they're pushing that portion back down to municipalities. So the impact on us for this year is 25,000. So again, it's not huge, but it's a little bit of that nickel and diming to death. So the city of St. Albert over the last several years has started to shift the conversation to long-term sustainability. Increased financial pressures related to asset management, community desires for growth, and downloading of costs from the province, alongside a legislative structure that limits a municipality's ability to generate revenues, threatens our ability to meet the needs of our residents without significant tax increases or potential service reductions. To combat this future, we must commit resources to the pursuit of the expansion of our non-residential tax base and aggressively pursue alternate revenue sources. And that is the end of my presentation. And if I could just maybe ask Renee or somebody to stop sharing my screen because I can never figure out how to do it. Perfect.
Thanks, Diane. Great presentation and really good agenda report too. So thank you for that. I'm opening it up now for questions or comments. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Ms. McMorty. So you noted a couple of things. So other tertiary impacts in the provincial budget, you start off with the education tax. How is that presented on our tax bill? It's certainly a separate presentation away from the Edmonton or the St. Albert municipal tax requisition. Is that right?
It is different. It is listed as a separate line item on the bill. But it's not it doesn't jump out at you as being something that's sort of not within our control. It sort of looks like very much like a St. Albert's tax bill, and there's just an extra line on it. I know we were working last year at looking at, I think we might have actually made a few changes in some of the language that we used in there. And we're still looking at potentially ways that we can present it on the tax statement to make that more clear for residents.
Yeah. I certainly encourage you in that regard. In the past, it's the educational tax line at the bottom, and all of a sudden you get this big lump from the city of St. Albert, and it appears to be one sum coming from the city. So, and the implication is that it's all under our jurisdictional purview, which it is not, which is the point you made. This is the provincial government doing their thing with the educational tax. So I would just encourage you to, however we can do that, is to present that as the city collecting the dollars, but this is a completely separate requisition on behalf of the provincial government. And I know that we have to do that with the Sturgeon Foundation or Homeland Foundation as well. The clearer we can be with our residents about who is actually demanding money from them, I think the better off we are. My second question was, in terms of the capital estimates, the federal gas tax, there is a one-time funding. The $3,622,000, I believe 2019, and then $3,656,000. Is that additional funds, or is that a calculation? It's on the bottom.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what that meant there.
So what that was, and the reason I pulled it out from the totals is I didn't want it to impact the averages that we were showing, but this was extra one-time funding that was given by the federal government in both of those years. So this actually truly is additional funding over and above. So in essence, in both of those years, they've made decisions to double our federal gas tax. And I apologize because I think it's coming a new name now. I think it's Canada Community Building Fund or something. They're renaming it. But those two were actually additional funding. Whereas the MSI contributions that you see in 2017 and 2021, although sometimes they are sort of put out in the media that it's additional funding being given to municipalities, it's really just a pot of money that's being front-ended. So it isn't really new money, but the federal gas tax was actually new money. So that's extra money that we were not expecting. So that's good news.
Okay. Thanks for that clarity. I appreciate it. And I too enjoyed reading the backgrounder. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from any members of council? Mayor Herron.
Interesting that Wes brought up the education property taxes. I spent all morning on Thursday with municipal affairs talking about that exact same thing, because there's some confusion. There was a couple of municipalities that actually had done what I've always wanted to do in St. Albert and put it on a separate piece of paper with provincial letterhead and actually gave a provincial phone number. If you have questions about this, call this number, don't call the city. And they got their hand slapped. So we got some clarification from municipal affairs, and you're absolutely allowed to do that. So I think we should be encouraging more and more, even if we divide our one paper into three, with municipal logo, provincial logo, and then a summary at the bottom of what you owe. But I think it needs to be even better. But that's a side, West, and I mean, we've all been dealing with that forever. The other point for municipal affairs is some municipalities do not divide it out and separate it out on their bill. And what happens is if the education property tax does not go up, they hide their municipal one inside of it. And so it works both ways, right? So this is all commentary. I have no questions to you, Diane. It was a great backgrounder and you used a lot of AUMA material. But I would also say you brought up a really interesting point that wasn't really in the backgrounder, was the allocation of LGFF needs to be scrutinized, and there is zero conversation on that yet, and like zero. But there's many municipalities, some of the smaller ones get a base amount, and I can't remember what it is, I can't remember, but it actually is their viability lifeline. If they didn't get that base amount of MSI, which is higher than what they would get if there was no base amount, keeps them alive. And those are the kind of conversations that I think need to be really considered as we talk about it. And we need to stop talking about linear roads, because that's just one piece of a road is how long it is. But municipalities like St. Albert have 6-lane roads, and those roads have curves, and those roads have sidewalks, and that's not calculated into the allocation of MSI. So those are the bigger conversations we need to have. But this was a good report, and if anything, I think it's good for the public to kind of see. And I think we need to acknowledge both the provincial and the federal government for the help capital-wise that they've given us in 2020. I think we would have been really struggling without it. So looking forward to hearing the next council's conversation on the 1.5%, because it's going to be required, in my opinion. That's all I got.
Thanks, Mayor. Any other questions or comments around this? Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. And Mr. Morty, I'd echo that your presentation was excellent as always, in the backgrounder I really enjoyed. Have we heard, so with this budget, we're not seeing further reductions of grants in lieu of taxes or our proportion of fine revenue? I believe it was last year where those were cut.
Yeah, that's correct. And we didn't see any further changes in this year's budget.
Okay.
So we were certainly happy to hear that. But again, when we talk about the small things kind of being pushed down, the fine revenue piece that came last year, I think was quite a shock, and none of the municipalities anticipated that. And it was also quite well hidden within the budget. So it actually took a few days for us to even figure out that was there. But if you remember, we had to do a budget adjustment that impacted our municipality by, I believe it was like over $600,000 a year, just that small change that the province made.
Thank you. And so it's about 600 for the fine revenue, and then grants in lieu of taxes was.
That one wasn't as big. It was only about 75,000, I want to say. We don't actually have a lot of those properties in St. Albert.
Great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay, you've unmuted, so you must have a question or a comment.
I was going to, but I didn't know you were sneaky watching.
Oh, yeah.
I guess, I mean, partly the question was answered in Diane's response to the mayor, but, you know, I'm looking at the recommended motion that's going forward. And I guess this is just an information item. And maybe I'm just seeking information that is going to come at a different time, and that this was just to kind of break the ice. I just don't know. So can you just go over like what was the purpose of this? Is this going to now begin to feed our other budget documents, or, you know, we just had the whole conversation around the 10-year plan, growth plans, and we still have to find a time frame, because like you identified in your presentation, you got either RMR or you got growth. And, you know, if the costs are going to go so high, how is this going to impact future growth? Or are we going to focus mostly on RMR? So, I mean, I'm just wondering what's kind of the next steps in relation to going forward with this. Is this just to start the conversation, or what else is intended here?
Yeah, I think you're kind of right. I mean, really, I think the purpose of this was really to sort of have a public presentation on a bit of the analytics that we did around the provincial budget and how it's going to impact us going forward. And I think it's really, as you know, as we're bringing forward different pieces of the budget, you know, the RMR, when we have the discussion again around the 1.5%, you know, which is scheduled to come up soon, this is just hopefully providing some context, maybe as to why some of those issues are important, you know, as we're bringing forward revenue opportunities, all those things. It's just helping set the context as to why this is important, you know, because these kind of decisions are impacting us long term, and we need to be making decisions today to help combat and manage this. So nothing specific out of this presentation, but you know, it sets the context for many other things to come.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Chair, I guess just in a follow-up then, are we going to do anything with the 10-year capital growth? I mean, I know we talked about it and we did approve it. Basically, we were going to have either a committee of a whole or something similar. Are we still planning that, or is that not right now in the books somewhere?
I believe that motion was leaving it up to council to establish that meeting and have that discussion. So I hadn't heard anything further on that.
All right, I think, you know, maybe I'm not sure. I mean, maybe agenda committee can discuss it or something. I mean, I think just from what I've heard in relation to the purpose of this information, I think it even speaks more highly of some of the issues that we're going to be facing, and leaving on the plates of a new council very shortly as they step into a budget as soon as the election is over. So I think I just can only reiterate what I've said a couple of times already. I think it's really important that we actually sit down and have more discussion on some of our growth capital projects, because honestly, I don't know how we're going to be able to afford them looking at this information and elsewhere. So anyways, those are my comments. Thanks, Chair. I can't hear anybody snoring, but that's a good cover for your husband.
It's the dog. That's snoring. I would just say that I think that we were going to put that on agenda committee, and I don't think we did last time, but I think that's what I recall when we wrapped up that conversation, is that's where we would slot it. So we'll have to remember that at the next planning committee.
I think we did, Councillor Hanson.
Did we put it on?
And I'm going to have to go back and find it.
Okay. All right.
But, yeah.
We'll let you know as a follow-up. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. You know, the one thing I have is as we look towards new alternate revenue sources, what's also very clear is that we have very little room for error here. So whatever decisions sorry, it's always the same time that I have to talk, right, for 2 seconds. Any decisions that we make, I think also need to be reflective of having minimal risk and really evaluating that risk, because if something goes wrong, we won't have that wiggle room, I guess, to compensate. So I think that's just one of the things that's really moved forward when we're evaluating things. Is just needs to be in the back of our head is the risks need to be minimal when we move forward in alternate revenue sources. So that's it.
Thank you. And I guess I'll just wrap up the conversation by maybe asking the mayor a couple of questions. When I look at this scenario overall, and I'm thinking 10 or 15, 20, 30 years down the road, it seems to me that it would be prudent to have reserves, for one. Sometimes the government takes issue with reserves. So do we understand what kinds of reserves we should have and what's prudent without being penalized for having reserves? Because sometimes that can happen. And also my question maybe to you, Mayor, would be, as you talk around your AUMA table, are all the municipalities talking about alternate revenue sources, and are they talking about their reserves, and are they talking about their level of concern and what they're going to be doing? And because if the province is going to ultimately continue to decrease what we're getting, the only thing we can do is burden our taxpayers unless we get an alternate source of revenue and unless we are prudent with our reserves. So, but I do get concerned with that, knowing what I know coming out of education. So do you have any comment around that really 500,000 foot picture?
A couple of things in that question, Councillor Ensign.
I know.
Diane, thank you so much for the quick turnaround on the reserve email from Thursday. That was awesome. It was fast turnaround. And I was reading the final report of our operational review, and there's a good conversation there about reserves as well. That's going to be coming too. So it's more of a perception thing, I would say, and probably a push and pull between the provincial government and municipalities. I think we're going to need to set up reserves for the natural disaster fund, probably. So I think I'm pretty proud of St. Albert and our reserve management, and maybe we need to actually have more, not less reserves. But as for the conversation from municipalities, there's a few municipalities, Councillor Henson, that are ahead of us on establishing the alternate revenue, and we've talked about that through municipally controlled corporations. They're doing it, but not that many. I think we're kind of leading the way. So I don't think people are thinking that way quite yet. I think, again, St. Albert's ahead of the times in trying to find non-tax revenue. And so the conversations around AUMA are still, how are we going to allocate the existing grants, and how are we going to fight the narrative that we have too much reserves? That's more of the conversation, not trying to be creative in getting new revenue. So we're a bit of a game changer in that one. So,
well, thanks. It's a little bit of an oxymoron situation. Sometimes governments don't like to see when institutions or agencies or boards or councils have too much in the way of reserves. But when you're reducing funds and there's only so much money in the taxpayer's wallet, you have to have the reserves in order to keep the firm going. Right. So it's always a balance. But Diane, it was great. Well, I'm saying what everybody else said. Great report.
There is a motion next week, or this week, sorry, at the Spring Leaders Caucus to try to get them to do LGFF on their original timeframe, and it'll probably pass, and who knows what the province will do to respond to it. But remember, the LGFF was brought in by the NDP government, and now the UCP is pushing it past the election date. So it's just it's kind of like kicking the can down the road. But
yeah, we all levels of government have to be creative, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask if there is, of our committee members, somebody who would like to move the recommendation.
I can do it.
Sure, go for it.
All right. All right, no, it's small. That the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee recommend to Council that the report titled Implications of Provincial Budget be received as information.
Thank you. Anything to open or close?
No, only that maybe this should be kind of a standing item every year. Every year the provincial budget comes out, and we should probably maybe a month later kind of have finance report to us what that means. And maybe we should even consider it for the federal budget. Doesn't quite affect us as immediately or as quickly, but federal budget's next week, right, Diane?
I'm not even sure. Maybe
I feel like it is.
Trevor was on the call. He probably knows.
I think it's next week, but anyways, yeah. So I think this is a good piece of information for council, and it's a really good piece of information for the public. That's
excellent. Thanks. Any other comments? Councillor Broadhead, Councillor Watkins. Okay, nothing for me either. So I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of our committee meeting. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Thank
Say
you,
hi to Molly.
Madam Chair. Talk to you, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bye, everybody.